If you are following any other astrology feeds on social media, you'll know that there is always something happening astrologically. And those feeds love to sensationalize how intense it's going to be, especially with these sun signs or these moon signs. Watch out. Are you feeling crazy today? Here's why. Make sure you ground today. I mean, you should every day, right? Okay, so it's not necessarily wrong in these videos. It's just pretty normal. Planets in retrogrades happen at least yearly. Mercury retrograde is 3 times a year. The outer planets almost always have their retrogrades overlap every year. Any mention of squares, oppositions, conjunctions between transiting planets is also very normal. The issue is people can either get lost in these details or can get to a place of defeat or feeling overwhelmed. On one hand, it's nice to know what might be affecting you from one day to the next, depending on your situation. But on the other hand, it turns into noise because it's always occurring. You know, there are always good transits happening too, but those don't usually get attention or likes the same way our news leads with fear. And these will typically offset the negative energy at times as well. So I'm going to start with eclipses. We are in what's called an eclipse season right now, a period of time when the combination of lunar and solar eclipses come around. The next coming eclipse is September 17th, which happens to be when the Federal Reserve of the United States is supposed to adjust the prime interest rate. So, you probably have been experiencing sudden, unexpected, out of left field things happening to you and others around you in various areas of life. These are characteristic signs of eclipse energy. Again, this is totally normal celestial behavior. Every year, we have at least a couple of eclipse seasons. I can do a whole video on eclipses and how interesting they are, but the point here is we need to fly out and see the forest for the trees. In this example, this coming eclipse is happening in Pisces, conjunct the planet Saturn, and on a supermoon. All that makes this eclipse more intense than we would typically have. Okay, good to know. But we need to consider the undercurrent of bigger cycles at play that are an undercurrent to these typical celestial events that we see every year. And that is what I'm trying to convey here. If you live in the United States, you know we have all been witnessing a political 3-ring circus for some time. And in less than 2 months, a new ringleader is going to be decided on. It's easy for everyone, as we can tell, to get caught up on it without knowing the energies that give rise to the environment the U.S. cultures and societies are going through recently. And I'm not talking about the last 3.5 years of the Biden administration or even the post-pandemic era some can acknowledge, which definitely relates. But I am talking about longer, multi-year generational cycles that the latest 4 generations of this country are not connecting the dots to. People, the cycles that are shifting in the coming year or so that have been and are transforming are nothing that these current generations have felt or experienced in their lives. The ones that are still around from the previous 4 generations have a sense, those who have been experienced the last World War, the Great Depression, the creation of the United Nations. So let's take Pluto. I mentioned in a previous video that it takes Pluto 248 years to go around the sun. The last time it was where it is today is where it was when this country fought off British tyranny and gained independence. The birth chart of the US shows this. So just think about the energy that would cause people to revolt for the sake of individual rights and freedoms. Pluto started to bring this energy to our present when it made a grand trine conjunction with Jupiter and Saturn around January of 2020 in Capricorn. Astrologers were even discussing how this energy would play out in conferences in the 90s. I was saying to my clients around October 2019 that when we come out of whatever starts happening in January 2020, we would all say, that's when everything changed. And here we are. Think about what Pluto, whose nature is of the underworld, the dark psyche, transformation, instinctual, animalistic, egoic tendencies, have touched on since it started in Capricorn around 2008. I'm talking about power structures, abuses of authority, control, judgment, even punishment. We have had the Great Recession right out of the gate, government bailouts, radical changes in policy, sweeping rights violations, all in various areas of life, and not necessarily just in the US. As it started slowly slipping in and dipping into Aquarius, we started sensing a new shift in energies. Right now, we're in the last 2 months or so of Pluto in Capricorn, before it will stay in Aquarius for the next 20 years. And it just so happens that it's doing so at the top of the US presidential election. Coincidence? What else is layered on here? Let's talk about Uranus. Uranus is a planet that carries a Promethean energy. If you know the story of Prometheus from ancient Greek mythology, this is the one that stole fire from the gods to give to humans. Uranus is contradictory. So it will say, fight for freedom of speech, but will cancel anyone who doesn't exactly agree 100%. It loves to fight for humanity, but really can't stand people. It is fiercely independent and wanting to express itself uniquely and really hates labels. It is rebellious, and that energy can come from getting triggered. The low vibratory expression of this can be intolerance, sometimes to the point of like brutal allegiance to a belief system or ideology. Uranus has been in Taurus, a fixed sign ruled by Venus, both whom are in stark contrast to the nature of Uranus. So since 2018, huge shifts in technology, money, resource allocation, what we consider family, wealth, and more have been the theme basically. Well, starting in May next year, Uranus will enter Gemini. Okay, cool. There are good things about this, but as Taurus is fixed and about resources, Gemini is not fixed, and it's about action and desire. It is Mercury ruled, and so there will be opportunities to actually see and hear the other side, at least a bit more openly. There will be more interest in space and space to work with both sides, but not without being triggered and rebellious. This will be more specifically about, as we are experiencing here and around the world, our ability to communicate, speak, and express ourselves freely. It will be about our language and how it is used. Clearly, people are really offended these days and clearly think that they have a right to do something about it by canceling those that offend them. And considering the extreme polarity that have been constructed with that, Pluto contributing since 2008, we need to expect that things will reach and exceed their boiling points. And this transit, Gemini, will last until 2033, about the same time frame I gave in a previous video about how long this ekpyrosis will play out. Okay, so Uranus moves slow, and it changes signs about every 7 years. Okay, got it. Well, get this. Uranus was discovered in 1781, when it was in Gemini. What else was going on then? Oh yes, the birth of the United States. So not only are we seeing a US Pluto return, but also its Uranus return. What's more, when was the last time Uranus entered Gemini? 84 years ago. The time it takes about it to go around the sun. About August 1941, which is just months before Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, which was the catalyst to get the US into World War II. Yeah, it's that type of energy. Okay, the last zinger on Uranus. There was a certain relevant book that was published just days before Uranus left Gemini back then, around August 1949. And that would be George Orwell's 1984. That's right. If you don't know much about that book, please take a look. I mean, we took away terms that are thrown around at present, like thought police, doublespeak, which is a process of indoctrination that forces people unknowingly and unwillingly to believe two contradictory beliefs as truth, even against their own beliefs or morality. I hope this is clicking now. Okay? Now, the Uranus return to that Orwellian energy is going to happen around August of 2032. So it really does lead us to a point of thinking, if we are at the start of this specific energy theme, these triggered battles, how much more are they going to level up to? Another takeaway here is about getting to the truth, which, as we have seen, is getting more difficult these days, especially with AI, another gift from Uranus and Taurus. One dimension of this is looking at the idea of truth with a capital T versus what we are seeing evolve with the importance of my truth and your truth. Lastly, let's talk about Neptune real quick. Neptune takes 165 years to go around the sun. Where is it now? It's been hanging out in and around the last degree of Pisces, which also happens to be the final degree of the entire natural zodiac. Astrology measures the start of the zodiac at 1 degree Aries. There are many archetypal and symbolic notions that I don't want to get into about this right now, but it's very significant. In Pisces, where it is very comfortable and considered the modern ruler, Neptune gives us a nice, dreamy, everything is fine feeling, even if everything is burning all around us. Neptune's nature is all about illusion, things not being what they seem. It represents the other world. It creates confusion, not knowing what to believe, and about how we connect with others. Just think about fake news, media, and political manipulation that have been on the rise for a while now. But when it goes into Aries, it will be within orb to some very intense and challenging celestial situations. That means, while not exact, these other objects are close enough together to cause a stirring mix of combined energy. So starting on March 19th next year, we are going to have the second of 2 March eclipses. This one at 0 degrees Aries. So right on the transition to Aries where and when Neptune finally enters at that time. Also, we've got cold, rigid, contracting, and structured Saturn right there. And that same day, by the way, Mercury and Venus will be joining the party as well. The news will just say we've got this really interesting planetary alignment around then. Yeah, interesting indeed. So Neptune takes longer to go through a sign than Uranus. And in this case, it won't leave Aries until 2038. But when it's in there, the active, fiery, Mars-ruled energy of Aries will be taking over the theme. It's action time. Time to make big decisions. Another thing about Neptune and Aries, as seen throughout history when it is there, is it really brings an energy of people really not liking being told what to do, how to be, what to feel, and how to live your life. Sound familiar lately? Guess what happened the last time Neptune went into Aries? 1861, the start of the Civil War in the United States. A war brought on by opposing viewpoints regarding the ownership of slaves. Just to add another flavor here, it was also the moment when Tsar Alexander II abolished serfdom in Russia. Let all that sink in. One last important point. If you are neck deep in picking sides in this U.S. election, freaking out about who might get elected and how if one ringleader wins, how will this affect your idea of democracy, your idea of what the future should look like, how Congress is going to vote and whatnot, take a deep breath and just let it go. It's going to be okay, whether you believe me or not. Whatever happens in November, everything I discussed here is still going on in the background. Stuff is going to happen. Things are going to change. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's supposed to. These themes are going to play out, and ultimately we are going to come out of this in a whole new world reality. There are deeper metaphysical shifts going on as well. These things are happening because they need to happen. Otherwise, they wouldn't be happening. White knuckling the oars of your boat, trying to force a direction in the rapids, is only going to exhaust and frustrate you. Let the river take you where it's going to take you. Better to practice this now while the rapids are only class 3 these days. Class 4 and above are right around the bend. Okay, I think that's enough for this post. This really is so much more to get into about some of this stuff with these outer planets, current transitions, and what they mean and stand for. I mean, comment if you're interested, and I can make a video about any of these topics. The whole point of this video is to point out how hugely significant and daily life altering all these transits are that we're walking into right now. Are you prepared for what is coming? If you think you aren't and need guidance on how your own reality will be affected now and into the shifting of these energies, reach out and schedule a session. As G.I. Joe says, knowing is half the battle.